Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SimSN Podcast, the show where I ask some of my favorite questions to some of your favorite people. I'm your host and NFL Commissioner. You can call me Pierce. My guest today is a fellow Sim NFL staff member who's been here even longer than I have. Sir Guest, would you mind introducing yourself?
If you don't already know, given my very conspicuous username, my name is Alex. I'm alexfall862. If that's breaking news in the podcast, I suppose. You heard it here first. My first name is Alex.
Well, there you go. My first name isn't Pierce, but that's neither here nor there. Don't worry about it. So, you've been here since the beginning, is that right? Or near enough to it?
I don't think this was even the first instance of this group of people having a Discord for discussion about tech sports. But for some project, I was looking back. Oh, I remember what the project was. Okay. So this is some real fake tweets project work that we're doing. So this is definitely shitpost meme territory. But we're working on I'm retooling a swear filter to catch mentions of quarterback names and different stuff. So I was looking through like the chat history of the Discord, and there were, when the Discord, like the earliest messages of the Discord, I was maybe like the fifth message or something, and the first, I think 3 or 4 were, I think maybe it was subsequent shit posting about bread or something. from the original Discord, which I think they called the shit box.
Okay.
But I was only very briefly part of that one. But if that doesn't imply my origins in the sort of the group, we were all part of another football sim, and that was sort of a protest Discord about some of the internal drama from that one.
Yeah. So you've been here since before the first college football season, basically when it was all.
Yeah, in fact, a little bit of trivia. If you go to the to your this YouTube channel, I think, or the original YouTube channel where the Purdue San Diego State game is posted, I am calling plays for Purdue in the very first SimEngine game before there was even a season. Just trying to see if it'll work.
Oh yeah, the first game. Our version of, what is it, Yale Princeton, or what's the first like college football game from like the 1860s or whatever one counts. I don't know. It was probably a couple Ivies. And then I don't know, because I don't actually remember. But for us, college football recruiting, was that you or Tuscan or a combination of both that built that kind of well, although again, I wasn't around for old Sim College, so I don't know how much of that you just took.
Yeah, over. No, I think the general premise is kind of the same. Like, well, all games are sort of the same. Of like, you have to put a number into a box, and then the number makes a thing show up. So that's kind of the same. The any sort of a thing I make, you have to assume it's a bodge job, and then anything good Tuscan did. Just as a universality. So I was I put together the recruiting for, I guess you could call them veterans now in the CFB space. Back when recruiting was on Google Sheets, I did that, which was cursed, but it worked. So you would, for folks who were using the interface, appreciate it, because what used to happen was you would go to a Google form. You had to go find the player ID in a sheet, and then you would paste in the player ID, and you'd want to get it right, of course. Then you put in the number of points you got. That would post to another form, and somewhere in my Google Drive is an old recruiting master list that's like 150,000 rows of people putting in their weekly recruiting submissions. And of course, Google, the drive is meant for like a 5-row thing of someone just like writing down, hey Bob, remember to bring goulash to the company picnic, and then sharing people on those sorts of things, and not basically like a bodge job of a relational database. So then, while people were recruiting, they would get this reference error, which is still an emote in the Discord, which is hashtag ref in the sim. I have a broken smart light, so bear with me as it turns on.
Do you need to move around a bit? Get your light back on?
Nah, it's yeah, I'm gonna fight it the entire recording. So that's a fun little game for everybody to watch as I fight with Casa.
All right, everyone, take a drink.
They're discount smart lights.
So,
but that's the background with the recruiting was, I made the sheet, so then more or less like, because essentially recruiting the math had to work inside of a sheets formula. Mm-hmm. And so by that virtue, then, that's how the recruiting game was made, is like, you can't be too crazy because you have to stuff it, even though they're absolutely absurdly large formulas, they had to be formulas.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first off season for SimNFL running free agency off of Google Forms. So, and even
you couldn't do any of this. Like, this whole thing couldn't grow to more than like 40 users if it was still by hand.
Yeah,
I think, because it'd just be impossible to keep track of everything.
And our roll call for CFB this year is already over like 80 people. I think we have 80 active users. So, yeah, there's no way. So thank you again, Tuscan. Can't ever say it enough for taking our thrown together little things and making them actually work in large systems. Although I got to say, for my money, college football recruiting is still one of my favorite like systems. It just, we've made tweaks. We've added some, what am I thinking? We added some new affinities, some earned affinities, which I like. But in general, I feel like that's been kind of, it's mostly stuck around as it has been.
Which that part of it does relate to the other community that this kind of originated from, which was in there again, points into a thing, and then out of the other side of the black box becomes, here's a recruit or no. In that system, you knew everything with precision. So then, what some of our other users who eventually you will have on here, you could maybe talk to them about. Some of these people are very clever and very smart, and they pull all the data together, and they know exactly, they can say, okay, so if I put 17 points on this one player, they won't commit this week. And if I get another week to put them in, that means that I will get into the role on getting that player. Or in that version, you just knew if you had one more point than everybody else, you won. So people could sort of snipe like crazy. So the system is built on this idea of sort of, there's both random chance and a fog of war. And I think both of those things stimulate both the sort of Skinner box of the engagement of recruiting, but also the lore and the memes, such as they are for recruiting. In the same way that like the game results are not, you cannot predict them, and then they birth their own sort of insanity.
Yeah. I like that. I like that this system. There is some reward for if you really want to dive in and keep track of things week to week. Like you can suss out some small advantages. Like you can see, you can't see who's spending points, but you can see boards. So you can see if some people have really busy boards and maybe sniper them or things like that. But that's a small enough thing that you can still log in once a week, put your points in, and get a decent class. It's not a requirement. It's an extra, maybe a little boost on top if you put in some extra time. Like that should be a positive relationship, but it doesn't have to be like, the only way to get top 10 is to, do a bunch of spreadsheets and check everyone every week, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And I think that's reflected in my former team. I mean, I created, in heavy air quotes, the recruiting system, which is, as you mentioned, lots of changes since Tuscan did his magic and moved it into the magical black box of the interface, which isn't a black box, by the way. You can see, you look at it, it's great. I'm sure Tuscan would be happy to share. But as far as understanding what it is, it's as good as a black box, because I don't know. But the the classes that I have had have gone from like top 5 to 70th, to top 20, to 50th, so on and so forth. And other folks have been consistently in a particular range, but, if anybody was supposed to know how to game the system, it should have been me. And it definitely did not happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than maybe whatever Black Magic Sweezy does, I feel like we're all on a fairly level playing field.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if there's a pentagram in his basement or what's going on there. So let's talk about.
It's next to the pentagram that gives Washington the kick return touchdowns.
God. Speaking of the pro sim,
yeah.
So,
which I find, I don't know. Nobody mentioned this in the NFL chat. The very first play of Washington's preseason was Espino returning a touchdown.
Was it really?
In the opening kickoff of the game.
Of course it was.
Yeah.
What else would it be?
I mean, now granted, he didn't do it the rest of the game, so maybe things have cooled off a little bit. But
I like the idea that him getting one return touchdown in a game is considered like almost like best possible scenario for the other 31 teams.
It's an interesting tuning thing because particularly when we were first getting things dialed in, and even still today, which I know folks have mentioned, from just this, we're recording this right after the first preseason games ran, and folks are going to look at this and go, well, I don't know, maybe running should be this way or passing should be this other way. One of the things when you're looking at like an NFL stat sheet that the game you couldn't possibly sort of enable in the game is if a quarterback, barring Nathan Peterman, when a quarterback throws 4 picks in a row, they don't play anymore. So like when you're looking at stats, the qualified stats leaders for a league, your worst quarterback is not really your worst quarterback. It's the worst quarterback who got enough attempts. So like Dante Hall, very good kick returner. Devin Hester, very good kick returners. What happens is the other team just doesn't kick to them.
Yeah.
In our sim, we don't have an ability to be like, yeah, just don't do it.
Don't do that.
Or like punt it a certain way. So, maybe the punts are 5 yards shorter, but they never get to return it. Those things don't exist. So some of that, I think you can attribute to just, he's good at returning and we don't have a way to mitigate good returners in the same way we don't have a way to mitigate that, was it Randy Moss used to get triple teamed at times,
Oh, yeah.
Is dare Dante Culpepper to see a second receiver on the field?
Yeah. Yeah, or Megatron. It's just like it doesn't just chuck it. He's there. He's fine. He's got it.
Yeah.
Balancing is so hard. Man, balancing is so hard, and just looking at and because and we did so much balancing based on kind of college football and being able to run and test full seasons, and then you get to pro and it's like, oh, like total yards are way down, like sacks and interceptions are way up, like points are down. It's hard. There's just so many moving pieces and so many thousands of lines of code. And then you test, and then you throw, 100 users into the mix who can do their own thing and push things.
And then there's sort of the apocryphal thing of like, testing to make sure. There's some old like hardware design story of like, hardware manufacturers really working to make sure the CD drive tray, loads the CD disk exactly. And then, when they put it into testing, the first user uses it as a coffee cup holder. And breaks it because the motor's not strong enough to keep pulling in when there's a coffee cup in it. So I don't remember the exact story, but there's sort of those apocryphal, silly stories. But I think there's a grain of truth in that of like, you can test all you want, but then a user is going to go and look at like, they're going to realize like there's a wide receiver. I'm not calling any particular team out, but there's maybe a wide receiver for some reason does really great in triple option, and they just start getting the ball like crazy. And you can't, like when you're setting up these test seasons and running thousands of test seasons, you can't go team by team and find like, okay, well, this is the way to maximize this roster. Or if I was playing this specific team, this is what I would do. The famed mystery ghost linebacker from the Miami Dolphins. You would throw at him and run at him, right? Because he's not very good. He's so bad he's not even on the field, and that's their real weakness. But because we have 80 users for CFB and all of the NFL teams have at least one person thinking about this stuff, it just becomes like you look at the test output and it's like, oh yeah, that looks right. And then you put it into the games like, oh, actually, everybody's getting, 7 yards a carry, or they're getting 2 yards a carry, and neither of those things is right, but it's because of choices they made or what users did or didn't do in their game plans, and you have all of these switches and things. And some of that's just part of the fun of a whole season unfolding and folks figuring it out, and then other stuff is just like, well, maybe we want to get that sort of triaged, before. But all in all, like I think the engine's in a great place given. But I mean, it's a real credit to all the work, first of all, Rocket does, but all of the folks volunteering to help out with that too.
Oh yeah. And you got to think about sample size too. People are going to look at 60 plays in their game and be like, "Oh, well, these 5 plays had really odd results." And it's like, well, yeah, but when you run 40,000, like you're going to have stretches of 5 plays that come really bizarre. And and what is real life sports except a random number generator that we then afterward attribute stories and storylines to? But people don't want random. They want like, well, if I do the X, then I want Y to happen, and I get that. So yeah, we're still working on it. So in terms of pro, has with this and old sim and anything else you've done, has the aggressive trade meta been a thing you've always loved, or has that been something you've diving in now for the first time in new sim?
So I figured this may be a question that might come up, and I was thinking about this, and this is going to be like a real philosophical response, but it sort of follows the same line we've already been discussing. I think a lot of people come into this sim, and 2 things happen. One is they bring themselves to the community, and so what is my background? It's fundraising, which is basically sales. So like, okay, so I take a system I take the kind of systems and approach that I would use to sell to trying to buy and trying to sell my picks basically, but trying to buy, players. But then and other people bring other skills. But the second thing that happens is you also gain skills here if you want as a hobby. And so I'm sure there are tons of people here who have become Excel masterminds just by virtue of there goes my light, just by virtue of participating in the sim. So, there's a little bit of both of those things that have been influential in sort of the way that I play the sim. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a wide ranging thing. Now, I think like all of us, we've all jumped onto Madden. Like, I'm going to trade for all the guys, and then I'm just going to crush all the other teams. But, I think you could even look in this sim year and say, okay, well, the Denver's still doing crazy Denver stuff. The Pelicans tried to do crazy Denver stuff 2 seasons ago. We were making a push. I was like, well, let's just see if we can get to the playoffs just for funsies. And I moved a bunch of picks around, and I made, I think it was Izako and Miggy's life miserable with all of these like goofy protections and things. And we traded for all these veterans, and not only did we not get to the playoffs with all of these higher rated veterans, we did worse and ended with like the third from last finish or something like that. And then since then, we've not made any moves or any trades, I think, other than taking on dead salary. So, I think some of it's circumstance. I know other folks will probably mention this if you have them on, but there's a split, I think, at the beginning of the NFL season where, what I reckoned with Denver was all of these folks with teams are going to want their own guys because that's part of the fun of like drafting your own quarterback and having them, and then they do stuff. but they got players on their team, and like you can't have 20 teams tanking at the same time. So just reach out and see. And so then again, like I keep track of this stuff. So write down all the people, go and check all of the teams with things I might want, keep a list of the things I might want, and when I want them, reach out. And if you haven't gotten a DM from me, it's because you don't have something I want. No offense, but otherwise, other folks have mentioned, like I'm sliding into everybody's DMs almost immediately when something becomes available. It's just part of the process. But the reason it went nuts in the beginning was because everybody wanted to tank, and I thought, well, that's a distressed asset, so I can buy it on the cheap, and relatively speaking. Now, I mean, I love sowing. Reaping is kind of a different beast, but that's all right. That's just that's how it goes.
Yeah. On the note of reaping, how we know the cliff is coming, right? For like you guys in Washington, like that's part of it. You have your window and it lasts for as long as it does, and then you go on from there. How steep and how wide do you think that cliff is? Do you think it's going to be dramatic? Do you think it's going to be like 2 or 3 or 4 years, or are you just like, it happens when it happens and I'll deal with it then?
Right. So one of the dangers of this particular, well, they're sort of the real life, it's an abstraction of real life NFL cap rules. One of the dangers or problems is that you can't actually Marlin style fire sale because there's so much cap built up in these contracts, and you can't, unless you sign sort of absurd contracts players would never sign with no bonus. Everything has a friction to it, so you can only move so much at a time. So is there ever a situation where like next year Denver has the lowest rated roster in the sim? No, it's like quite literally impossible. What I think you're seeing now with like a Miami and a Carolina is they're in the stage Denver was in a year or two ago, where you still have some assets to draw in really quality pieces that you can retain for a year or two and sort of cap be damned. You can figure out an extension that'll make all of those guys stay on the team. It's just a question of like, how wacky do you want to be with the extensions? Whereas Denver is in the spot right after that, which is you can't actually be that wacky with the extensions because at some point you got to pay them, and each deal you make is more friction on making moves. It's a great deal I signed for Peter London. I mean, despite the memes, because he only costs $9 million a year, and he's an okay quarterback, but he's probably the best. Oddly enough, the best runner I would argue one of the best runners in the sim by production, because he's got 90 speed. I don't know where that came from, but he's got some wheels. He's sort of like actually a very good comparison for him in real life would be Daniel Jones. Like never wins any, he's maybe not the reason the team wins the games, but he is surprisingly shifty and can sometimes complete forward passes down the field further than 5 yards.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting, by the way, to see if like Peter London continues to be efficient without Hugh Kahn in the backfield, who has very high receiving stats. I don't know. But anyway, that deal is great. And then the 2 tackles I signed early for long extensions. Both of those things, great. I got very lucky in that the tackles have been improving, but we're sort of at the mercy of luck when it comes to whether the offensive line is any good, because those guys are locked in. But all of those deals are also things that prevent change from happening, because those deals cannot move. Mm-hmm. Peter London is not going to leave the team because there's no cap room. So I think you're seeing Denver just moving to that next stage, and we'll see other teams move to that part of the life cycle of a team. This sort of part of the team is life cycle. This is the first time it's happening in the sim because it's only been around for 3 or 4 years. So this is the sort of graceful decline, not because I wouldn't think it would be amazing to just tank and hoard all the picks pick all the players, have so many picks I can just take the funniest names at the end of the draft or whatever. I'd love to do that, but the cap prevents you from doing that. So then you have to think, okay, well, and you can't be terrible, because no matter what you can't intentionally throw games or anything like that to get a top pick, because no matter what the hard numbers say about a particular player, your highest rated players will lose value as a trade asset in the future if their stats don't line up with their attributes. So I could sign, if I wanted to go crazy, I could just let players leave, not replace them, and then just let practice squad guys come up. But then all of a sudden, my defense is one of the worst defenses in the league because I don't have any linebackers. And then that's going to diminish the value of the defensive line if I wanted to move them. This is all just hypothetical. Yeah. So the decline can't be a rapid, we're the highest rated roster this year. Next year, we're moving everything, both because of the cap, but also because you have to attempt to stay in contention as long as you can in order to keep your assets valuable for transitioning those into fungible things like picks or cap space. So it won't be quick. It'll be in reality, but aside from joking around, it'll be a gradual descent into mediocrity, which, of course, as a in real life Nebraska Cornhusker fan, I'm very familiar with. So it won't be too traumatizing for me.
Yeah. I think you talked about friction when you talked about moving picks and locking in costs. I know the Rams were in a particular place this offseason. They moved early draft picks just because there was no way they would be able to pay them, because 80% of their cap is in bonus, and a couple of big 3 and 4 year contracts that they just can't move. And so it was being very careful with timing those picks in such a way that they didn't bring on more people than they could pay, and then giving it enough time so that, to your point, that players can be moved or enough can fall off naturally that then you can have money to bring in picks or younger players.
For example, there's one move we could make. Two. What did we do? We sent Gerganis out, who immediately just lit on fire like a car with no engine in it, rolling off the lot, which is very funny.
Poor Cardinals.
Condolences to the Cardinals. But then the only other move we could make was moving Hugh Kahn, because he was the only contract that could move without a cap penalty. And if we wanted to do other shenanigans, we couldn't cut too close. Although I did think long and hard about a deal in free agency I could have made that would have brought the team to 0.01 cap space, which I thought would have just been really fun. But then I decided in my better judgment, I decided not to do that, and instead cut a wide receiver so I could have future cap room and more flexibility. So those are the things you'll see more likely, is just letting players go and not re-signing them, or cutting players and doing weird money things like taking the best running back and just sending them off. I mean, it's going to be really fun in Jacksonville seeing what Hugh Kahn does with the memeiest quarterback in the sim, which, by the way, early returns on Matt Howard are amazing. But, I mean, 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in one game. And maybe he had 50% completion. It was close.
So
that's a very fun quarterback. But
is he in that Philip Avila model where it's just a lot of everything, a lot of yards, a lot of picks, a lot of touchdowns, just every number goes up?
Yeah. 55 touchdowns, 55 interceptions, 55,000 yards. Yeah. He's doing a thing. You gotta leave him alone.
Eat your heart out, Jameis Winston. Yeah, but the Hugh Kahn move is the deals you probably see me doing more often, and see teams that are kind of sort of at their sort of peak, heading the other direction. Is okay, well, I can't trade $1 for $1.25. And I can't trade $1 for $1.25 now, but then 50 cents later. It'll be, this is metaphor is getting stretched, but I can trade $1 for 75 cents. But the nice thing about 75 cents is that's 3 quarters, and now I have more flexibility to move those 25-cent pieces around. That's kind of what you'll see, and then eventually I'll just
I'll not win the AFC West and then just never hear the end of it. That could still even be this season.
I mean, you didn't win the West a couple seasons ago. You still made the Super Bowl, so as a wild card. But
I think this is the first year since the first Super Bowl. If I'm not mistaken, I think Washington won the Super Bowl without winning their division.
No,
Maybe
Washington's won. Washington's won every division. They're. I think.
Oh, it was the Cowboys. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm. Cowboys were wild card, yeah. So yeah, we're 50-50 so far on wild card champions. And I think I'm trying to remember. I think we're at like, I don't know, 10 or 11, maybe 12 playoff teams per conference in the 4 years. Like we're about like 75% of the teams of the franchises have made the playoffs in their history at some point.
And that's the other consideration of not tanking at the beginning of the sim was like everybody all tanking at the same time. That's still fun because you're still getting young guys on your team. The problem is, it sort of end up crabs in a bucket, and you end up with this weird. Some teams are just in this weird space where they got some young pieces. They got early returns that looked promising, but then they weren't. And then what do you do now? Eventually I'll find myself in that space with Denver. But it's going to be interesting to see the cycle of the league move through a full maturation. Where there's maybe a more even distribution of sort of contenders.
Yeah.
And then teams that are rebuilding.
Yeah, it's and we're in this spot where in general, so many players, especially with prime age now, are just improving in general. So you look at, you have your young team and you're like, oh, I have all these great progressions. It's like, well, yeah, but every team has that, right? And the floor is just going up and up and up. So it's not just a matter of how much better are you getting, it's how much better are you getting faster than the people you're playing against.
Which was the idea behind the power rankings article, was to just have a way to measure the relative ability as opposed to the specific attribute number.
Yeah.
And one thing I added this time around was something to output what's the range of attributes for starters. And offensive line in particular, I think, is now at 75 overall is an average offensive line starter, which in the first sim, like 75 was a top half starter. Mm-hmm. So it's just growing. Now, I will say, one of the benefits of that is that the way that they're getting to the higher overall is just like you want some sim lore. It was literally, I think it was maybe Smackums or somebody just made a thing up that was overall before there were games even run, because you just needed some kind of a way to figure it out. And I don't think that's changed. So overall, it's just a broad category, broad categorization of players' ability. But the way players are getting that overall higher is different than it was in previous years, in that you have a boom bust system, which is a single instance of progression. So you have higher variance in that than you would year over year growth. And because it's just a big jump and a one-time roll. And then you also have training camps where some people are leaning into strength, some people are leaning into shoring up weaknesses on particular players, or they want something that fits their scheme or approach. Those players are going to different teams and maybe getting a different training camp. And you're just getting a lot more variety, both in the sort of the overall inflation, which is great. It's fine because it allows all of this it allows all of these different sort of orthodoxies on how to build a team, all seem viable and interesting and exciting to engage in for the sim. But you also have a thing happening where even just assets are more unique and they appeal more specifically to specific teams than maybe they did at the beginning of the sim, where I think I have one. I know for a fact, like, Denver's inside linebacker is against scheme, but that's just, speaking of friction, like, that was the only linebacker I could take on. to improve the linebackers. So I suffered through that. But then signed him to a massive extension. But don't read too much into that. But you have, I think maybe the Chargers are, speaking of that linebacker, are a good example. The Ravens are probably also a good example of this, of where, disregarding the Chargers' result in the first week of preseason, like they're building particularly their offensive lines to do a very specific thing. And so in some ways, the overall isn't reflective of progress. It's more specific attributes, I think, that they're looking for in order to do the thing they want to do on offense, where compared to like the first Denver season, now I've got that inside linebacker, but I think the first Denver season I had 2, 3, 4 starters that were not really fits, but the number must go up. So, and the difference between like good player and median player was so large it didn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that's changing in the league now, where you have to be more intentional about who you bring in and how you sort of foster your roster.
Yeah, but I like that from a design standpoint. I like that. Giving people those options, giving people tools of like, you have a lot of ways to build your team, a lot of ways to improve, a lot of ways to acquire, players that you think you can use regardless of what one stat or one overall says. I do chuckle at your mention of number must go up, because I do feel like that. Another way I see that a lot, because I do mock drafts every year. And it's interesting to look at, 'cause I like that, because you look at a team not just where they are now, but kind of where you think they're going. And some teams can be tricky to mock for, because it's like, oh, well, you have this group that's not good, but like you just spent a first on them, so you don't need to go back to that well. You just need a little time, maybe.
Well, when you look at, I think London might be a good example of this, where I got very lucky with him and those 2 tackles, in that the tackles, they're pass blocking tackles, but they're decent run blockers. Peter London is a field general quarterback. He can run really well. Mm-hmm. And so that allows us a ton of flexibility on scheme and player acquisition, because they can just do it now. Lately, the passing hasn't been blowing the doors off the joint, but it's been efficient. But it allows us different chances to try things, where when you're looking at some of the teams that are drafting players, other investments force their hand on the kind of players they want to grab, and maybe steer them away from just sort of a best player available approach, which is really interesting, because that's also how real life works. Is, you sign Peyton Manning, well, you better spend money on that offensive line, because he's not getting out of the way of those, defensive linemen, or Andrew Luck. Yeah. You got to spend money on protecting Andrew Luck, because if you don't, he'll just go take his ball and go home.
I think Chicago. Who is Chicago's starting quarterback? They have another one, because they have a pocket QB, but he has like 87 speed, and he's been like a 1,000-yard rusher for them. And so, yeah, at first glance, you're like, oh, that's not what he's. You see pocket quarterback, and you're like, how are you such a good running team? It's like, well, because he can run the ball. and you know, it's bothering me that I can't remember his name.
Gerald Lewis.
Lewis, thank you. Gerald Lewis.
That's the other thing I think we both hold, just from my sort of incessant, from you having to keep track of all this shit, and me just with my incessant trading DMing, is we'd probably know Sim NFL starting quarterbacks better than we know in real life starting quarterbacks at this point.
Oh, for sure, for me. But I've my interest in the NFL has been waning for a decade.
I can't imagine why. There's nothing that happened like off the field with your favorite team.
Yeah, for listeners who don't know, I am a real life Browns fan, or was, and I was basically done with the team sucking, and then Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb kind of brought me back, and I got to watch, the first playoff win since I was 9 years old, So the first one I ever actually remembered. And then other things happened, and I went, okay, I'm done.
It's fun that the owner getting investigated, I think, by the FBI, was it, for tax fraud, doesn't even register
Right?
on the scale of Brown shenanigans.
That's put it on the list, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, they have one method of solving problems, and it is effective. I mean, because look at Myles Garrett. He was like, I'm going to a contender, and you can't stop me. And then they backed up a truck of money. He went, okay. Like, they have one solution to fixing problems, and it's like, what if we just gave you a bunch of money?
I find it interesting that sort of Jerry Jones is always rumored as being that kind of owner, and then when it came to Micah Parsons, chose not to.
Right.
But that's the wrong sport here. We're talking about we're having a real discussion about fake sports.
Yes,
right now.
we've gone off track. But to your point, yes, I think I can get at least 75%, maybe 80% on a good day for the sim, and I'm rapidly losing that in real life. Quarterback, I'm also very intrigued just because of the high prime age. I'm very curious as to what that's going to do. Because right now, like, with prime age and with, regressions and retirements, especially retirements being kind of sparse, we have this thing right now where the high value of veteran free agents, which I do want to bring down, but it's kind of backdoor doing the thing that the NFL does anyway, which is that players get old really quick and very quickly lose their value. So we have this weird situation where we do have high overall players that it's like, well, no one wants to pay them. And so I don't know. It's like, well, I kind of want to fix that, but I kind of like the point we're getting to, which is that NFL careers are short and, your peaks are there and then you move on. And yeah, maybe a player thinks they can play at 32 and maybe no team wants to invest that.
And it's, one of the other challenges. So you talk about balancing being a challenge. The other thing that you have to deal with, particularly when trying to tackle free agency, is you're making a game and basically one part of that game does not play, which is the player's motivation. So how do you prevent? So in some ways, what you're trying to encapsulate is like these guys. I think this. I don't mean this in a political manner, but I think Colin Kaepernick is a good example of a quarterback who was out of the league, wanted to get back in the league, but he wanted to get back in the league under a certain circumstance. I feel like Shedeur Sanders is probably going to be another good example of this. No, I want a chance to play. And part of that chance means you have to show that by paying me money, as opposed to putting me on a cuttable minimum contract. Because what's good your word that, oh yeah, sure, buddy, you'll start if you're going to give me, $500,000.
Right.
And so in some ways, the free agency, having contracts that don't move down all the way down to free, is trying to represent that of players going, no, I'm not going to do this unless, if I play another 5 seasons, I might, end up with sim CTE or whatever. I can't. I'm going to have sim arthritis, and the sim VA and sim healthcare is terrible. So I'll never get the sim retirement that I want. So, it's just part of that challenge of trying to figure out, how to make that work. But quarterback in particular is an interesting position. My guess of what's going to happen, and I worry about this in a sort of not in a day-to-day thing, but just existentially, is like, oh God, am I going to have to resign Peter London? Like, am I stuck with this guy for a decade of real life? Because what if he every year he gets better? He's objectively one of the best quarterbacks in the sim. He might be unclutch. Do I just keep rolling him out there if he's not really a scheme fit for the type of offense I want to run, even though his attributes are great for it, but I can't get a scheme boost for him? And The next contract's probably going to be like $30 million or something like that. And his passing production is sketchy, even though on paper it should be. He's sort of like the anti-Chop, where Chop should be like a really, really good quarterback and isn't. London should be a really efficient passer and productive and sort of just odd. If he keeps going for another 3 or 4 years, it'll be, and then he regresses a little bit, he'll still probably be on a sort of a trajectory that'll keep him forcing my hand.
Yeah.
That whole way. And in the meantime, you'll have all these other quarterbacks coming into the league, and they're probably going to start around between 60 and 70, my guess is, overall. And I may have my hand forced into re-signing Peter London because he's just that good on paper. Other teams will be in maybe similar situations. Who's going to sign and play all of these rookie quarterbacks when we've all got these massive deals on quarterbacks that are already established and that we've started to build rosters around and have guaranteed money, making sure that their archetype matches their supporting cast archetype, and those people have, there's friction in changing all of this. What happens to all the draft picks? Do we suddenly see like running back becomes the number one pick every year because that's a quick moving asset that is very valuable in the short term, and quarterback is like, well, there's only 2 teams who want to draft a quarterback every year, and I'm not, I don't need to be worried about that because they didn't get one of the top 5 picks, and all of the top 5 picks have been traded for by playoff teams who need a running back really bad. So, I don't need to pay a rookie quarterback all that much. I'll just wait until one falls into my lap. And then we'll have, I figure the other thing that'll probably happen is we'll have sort of the middle class hollow out, which is teams will intentionally not sign veteran QBs. There's a real life example of this, but I can't remember who it is. But you'll have a lot of teams who are just like, well, why would I spend $10 million on the 75 overall quarterback who's in year 10? They're not going to get better. Mm-hmm. I need a quarterback, but the team's already not great. I'll just, I'll roll with what I've got, and then I'll sign. I know that there won't be urgency in the draft because everybody else has these mega deals on their QBs. So I'll just sweat it out and see. Or we could end up with, where how it works in real life, where a team drafts a good rookie QB and they just say, oh, fuck it. And, they cut their veteran QB or force him to sort of retire and turn into a megastar CBS football announcer or, whatever.
There you go. Well, although counterpoint to your mid-tier thought, which is that we don't have rollover cap. So right now it might be, well, if I'm a mid-tier team and I have, 10 million or 15, 20 million in cap space that's not going to go toward next year, well, maybe if I can sign a guy who might get me a little bit better, could be possible. Although I do see, to your point, like a certainly we have this weird kind of like hourglass figure in the NFL. We have a lot of crazy good teams, and then we had like 8 or 9 teams like last year with 5 wins or fewer, and you actually have a pretty sparse middle, where usually the NFL it's a lot of like 7, 8, 9 win teams, a lot of teams crammed in there.
If you ask the Seahawks, I think they might tell you a little bit differently, that the top of that hourglass was very cramped.
That's true. I might have some AFC bias going on here. And I guess it's true in the league that typically by conference you have about 7 or 8 teams with winning records, and 6 or 7 of them, depending on how the divisions work, go to the playoffs. But yeah, just in every hypothetical, as you said, balancing is hard. And not only on the pro side, not only balancing the on-the-field result, but now trying to balance all the machinations that go into free agency and trades and everything that can stir that pot. It's intriguing and frustrating, depending on how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah, and it's, I think the part of the fun of the sim is you're just watching other people find their own way through that. We're all basically playing a game where we kind of know the rules, but and we sort of know what we want success to be in this game state. But beyond that, we're all finding our own steps through that game, and it's fun to watch people chart, their own way through it. Where like Houston has gone through like 3 or 4 stages of sell-off, and then they find themselves like, they got some interesting pieces there. After all, they've gone through an ownership change, which, it's not like a real life ownership change, but it's a change in perspective when someone else is running the team, and they've gone through that, and they're still an interesting team. They beat the Cardinals, who started a Nebraska quarterback.
Yeah.
And yet they lost by 1 score. I wonder.
Well, they won. Houston won like 7 games last year. Like it was and had like 3,000 yards rushing. So yeah, I it is also fun for me. I hope it is as fun for everyone else. I do keep stressing, patience and understanding as things change. I find it interesting and fun to know that that there isn't an established meta, there isn't a single established right way, that we're all figuring it out. I know some people get frustrated sometimes when things either don't work the way they thought they would, or when something changes and someone says, "Well, if I had known this was going to happen, I would have made a different decision a year ago or 2." And I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
Hey, if I could go back in time, I would move all my draft picks and get a bunch of veterans, and maybe it'd be the Browns instead of the Broncos in 4 straight Super Bowls.
There's still time, man. You can, you could easily put a roster together in the next week by moving the rest of your draft picks that could compete with Miami for, home field advantage.
I don't know if that's true.
But the interesting thing about those sorts of challenges, and maybe I'm the worst person to say this, but when you look at like an Arizona or Los Angeles Rams and other sim communities, I think Madden is probably a good example of this. In their CFMs, you'll have an approach or a style of play on the field that is just objectively the most effective way to do something. The Rams, I think, are a good example of what might look like something like that, where Avila is throwing for unconscionable amount of yardage. They have never won a Super Bowl, right? So ultimately, am I right about that? Because it's Washington, Denver. Yeah,
they made one.
Washington, Denver, Dallas, Washington. They haven't won one.
Yeah. They made,
but by right, like they have the most absurd offense on the face of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of that is, I think, because the on the field engine, obviously, any sort of a program abstracts the thing itself into a simplified version of what it is. But the engine is specific enough that chucking it down the field, while you can get a lot of yardage per play, you can also throw incomplete passes. And so when they play teams that can defend them well, their drives stall. In the same way that like a team that can defend the run really well slows Denver down. But these are things I think it's a testament, I think, to the focus on every offseason, the focus on balance, that those things have sort of bore out in the way that you would think in real life football plays out, which is leaning too hard into the meta eventually sort of bites you a bit, because you need the ability to address what the other team is going to throw at you. And if you sort of lean too hard into one thing, you lose the ability to be flexible and adapt to that. So, I think the off-season changes each year that have been strive to get closer to in real life football, I think have helped and been successful.
Yeah, it's amazing to look back just a couple of years and realize all the things, all the features we've added, all the things that we've found and fixed. And I mean, it's tough for me just because Rocket has this list of, all the things that we want to address, and then something inevitably can't get done this year, so it gets booted to next year. So we tend to, on the admin side, focus on, the 5 to 10% of things that aren't working the way we want them to. But yeah, so much has been done the last few years that I do think the engine's in a good place. I think we're still tweaking and working on things, but yeah, I think it's in a good place. And
to sum it all up, basically like earnest attention to the engine every off season to allow everybody to have a meaningful chance to participate and try their own way and see it be successful, I think has made the sim and the community engaging and fun for people.
Yeah.
In aggregate, obviously, we individually, I'm sure you hear maybe a different story from individuals who maybe have gripes about specific things, but I think part of that magic is the attention to the balancing. Even if you don't ever get it right, it's just trying to get closer and closer to something that's fun and fair for every approach.
Yeah. And that's what it's about ultimately. You want people to have fun, and part of that is the engine and making things interesting and viable and dynamic. And part of that is also the community, making it fun to be around and chat with. That's why I'm glad I'm doing this show, because it lets me connect with people and talk shop. And it's just fun to pick your brain and hear you think 10 steps or 5 years down the road, and this could lead to this, and then we'll have to address that. And
it's also important for the community. When I slide into your DMs, now you know that this is the face going, hey, what would you give up for Donald Kelly? Or every year, every off season, I make a point around the draft to send the Raiders hey, what would you give up for blank? And I preface it by quote. I think I've got it right. I'll have to go check, but I reply to the previous ask from a year ago. Just to keep track. And of course, they send some choice words back because we're bitter friends, as we shall say.
Awesome. Well, this has been entertaining and enlightening. You have any final thoughts or things you want to share? Any wild predictions? Any last items before we sign off for today?
Did you have a recurring segment you were going to do? Nah.
I don't have any time device on me. I feel like we've had a good talk. I let it go where it wanted to go. This is episode 2, so the bits will come. Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
I wanted a fancy name. Now it's called the SimSN Podcast because I'm not creative in that way.
There are like 500 different comedians in LA who are doing a podcast after their improv night.
Right.
Who have probably taken it's like 1,000 monkeys at a typewriter. They've taken every podcast name you could think of that's fun anyway.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna let it grow. We're gonna let it breathe, and something. Yeah. You stick some stuff to the wall, and something's gonna stick eventually.
And eventually, you need a producer on camera. Then that's the thing that always happens with the podcasts.
Right.
I don't know if I have a parting thought. Maybe I have a parting question.
Okay.
Which is what do you think? So obviously you're kind of tied up with just keeping the lights on, but also the show and then the sort of video podcast that we're doing. So I'm not saying this is something you have to do, but what do you think I'm not going to say that. I'm going to phrase it this way. What would you be most appreciative of as far as extra content around the sim if it were to happen that would add to the community? because you're lifting I enjoyed the too involved shit posting that I do. I enjoy, like right now, I took a break from making the third version of the scouting tool to do this. I enjoy doing this stuff, but you're doing a heavy lift. I mean, it's fun, but it's a heavier lift. But so what would you think would be something either you would just like to see someone do that you don't know how you would approach, or do yourself, or something that you just don't have the capacity to do, but you would love to see?
In like a media sense, or in like a
or whatever, or just like you need help with something you'd love someone to help you with. This is a cry for help on help running the league.
I mean, yeah, I love seeing media. I love when we get new users that come in and build stuff. I love that we have mentors that answer questions for new people when they come in. But yeah, I would love to see more people writing content or even doing video. I know video can be a little intimidating, but my advice to people is always just to start. If you want to write something, just write something. Or a great way, if you want to start making content, we do actually technically have a media section. Like we have like our press section, and we have like is it like press releases or press conference? We have like a section which almost no one uses, where you can go in and basically just like open a press conference and then have users ask you questions and you respond to them. So that's one thing you can like just start and link to and have people ask you questions. But yeah, I love media in all forms. I would love to see more people doing video stuff. Is it Clem? Who's doing the college football previews by conference?
Let's just say it's Clem. I obviously, as an avid engager with that, I know exactly who did it.
But I love.
I have famously detached myself from the competitive aspect of the FBS space, so I couldn't tell you.
But yeah, I mean, as I said with Liberator, be careful with your comments because we'll always put you to work. Whatever people are interested, if you like the community, we always need more mentors answering questions in the mentor help channel, or if you just want to, throw together a quick media thing. I love seeing media that works together, like when people co-opt mock drafts. I know people talked about wanting to see a PTI or an Around the Horn, which is not what I'm doing here, but would be fun to see more users interacting with each other in the same
so much production work. But you know what? A way that could actually work is like if there is a channel you could use reacts to be the buzzers, maybe. And that maybe the audience could be the buzzer, or you could be the the host could be the buzzer or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily, because I think the great thing about a press conference as a bit is that it's asynchronous. So you can post it, walk away, come back tomorrow, make some jokes or responses, or serious responses, whatever kind of press conference you want to have. The tough thing with like producing a show, you're already, experiencing this now, is like, we got to herd cats. When are you free?
Well, yeah.
Is this other person free? You want 4 people? Well, good luck. I mean, well, you've DM'd. Pulling back the curtain, but I know you've done some other stuff. What are they? Instead of real talk about fake sports, it's fake talk about fake fantasy.
Yeah.
And that in itself is sort of famous for the same problem, which is like, how do you get 4 people to give up time?
Yeah.
Because they've all got their own cool stuff that they're doing outside of that. But you could probably do that in like the Discord where it's asynchronous, I suppose.
Yeah.
A little bit. You might have hurt feelings, like people are just like, I can't believe people don't agree with me that Brandon Savage is the future of the Ravens.
That's the thing is, it's all in good fun. It's all for the sake of it. I did think of one thing though. If money, not money, if like tech were no obstacle, if we could figure it out, I would love to do like the last week of the NFL season when you've got clinching of playoff spots is on the line. I would love to, instead of going games in order, I would love to do a red zone thing where all the games get streamed at once, like slower, and you would follow them all and have someone live streaming and like going game to game and being like, oh, this team's up. If this result holds, this team will be in, this team will be out, and then that would be impossible to do because we'd have to change everything about how we stream games.
I mean, I could see the sort of buttons that you would have to connect there do exist, because you could do it where, so you know the kick times of the games, and you know from the time of possession, you know how long after that a thing happens. So theoretically, I mean, you wouldn't do it using the Discord bot. That's probably the tricky part. But if you just took all of the games, I think.
The word "just" is doing a lot of heavy lifting in your sentence.
No, I was just thinking like the scouting tool basically already, the one I'm working on right now already I think gives you all the information you would need to do that. Because it can combine all of the plays in the play-by-play, and then you could sort them. You would just add a field for like the kick time of the game. Then you'd have a column that takes the time left in the game and the kick time and adds that together in a number and sort all the plays using that. And then you would just filter for like scoring, or you'd filter for the plays you want to see that are sort of red zoney plays, and then there you go. And then depending on how that Discord bot works, you basically just feed it the new play-by-play you've made by combining all of the games and creating these helper columns and then filtering it. You just say this is a game, but it's actually like 10 games combined. I think you could probably do that. The real battle is like, as you mentioned, the league is in sort of an hourglass. So is the crunch time of red zone in that last week just like, how are the Seahawks going to blow it this time? No offense to playoff cursed Tuscan.
That's true.
But I think that's probably very possible. But this is a great example of like what I said before of like how a hobby community can help you grow skills is like these sorts of like, I would love to see if this could happen. And then flipping that switch from like, I want to see somebody else do this to like, I bet I could do a version of that. It's how so many people turn into learning how to do a thing. Like you're learning how to produce video content and podcast. Well, maybe you already do. I don't know. In other realms of your life, but like you're building that skill, or like the shitty programming that I do, I would have never learned that if I didn't have to try to figure out, who I wanted to sign for, wide receiver or whatever, or try to figure out how to make a recruiting thing for everybody in the football sim. And then sitting there on those Excel spreadsheets and waiting, like 2 minutes while all of these query functions finish and going, there's probably a better way to do this. I don't know. In the history of programming, I bet they probably figured out a way to deal with this. And then doing that. And then you just bit by bit, you kind of figured some of that stuff out.
Yeah. I started learning to program after I joined this league. And even then I was learning Python, which is not what this is written in. And then so I had to learn bits of this language to help Rocket adjust the engine. I still can't believe he let me touch it. I'm shocked.
Right.
And actually I have to go back this week and look at NFL overtime, and we got to fix that because we don't guarantee possessions to everyone.
I'm really disappointed about that because this is probably an opinion held by everybody over the age of 30. I like the old timey overtimes I grew up with the sudden death and the unending college football games that just never stop. Those are always fun, and I feel like that part of my childhood has been robbed of the sort of Eli Manning, Ole Miss 40 overtime games, and
it's funny that
the Donovan McNabb. I didn't know a game could end like that. Nonsense.
Yeah. Well, then there's an even older school, which is like, do you remember ties in college? Because
Yeah, but then you got to make a standings table with 3 inputs.
I didn't say I like that. I'm just saying there's always an even older school who's like, well, I remember.
Yeah.
But to your point, I absolutely agree that letting a hobby or an interest spark something in you that you then start to do, And then I'm a firm believer that it is in the doing that you find that you learn things best and that you find out what you need. Yeah, programming, AV stuff, all that I only do in Sim and only because of the Sim. So
Until at some point in your life, someone comes running into your office and goes, "Hey, this is crazy, but tomorrow we have to have a podcast. And it's got to be about this made-up thing we did." And you'll be like, "I know, I can make this sound. I can make the realest talk about the fakest thing, and I have so much practice you wouldn't believe it."
oh my god, one can only dream.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest on this show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've loved our talk. And yeah, thank you so much for stopping by. To everyone who has watched and listened to us chat for I don't even know how long, appreciate you.
Yeah, condolences on that, but thanks for suffering through all of that.
Thank
I
you.
know some specific people that will be scrubbing through it for insight into Denver Broncos strategy, which is an okay tool, but you should give it a full listen so that Pierce gets the shattering ad revenue that YouTube is, I'm sure, sending you for.
I live and die by these 30 views on my YouTube channel, which is not even
Right.
mine. It's the league's, but okay. Stop talking so I can do an outro.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. Appreciate you so much. We'll see you next time on the SimSN Podcast. Bye-bye.